you done now? Oh, Brad, what have you done now?
Hey guys, Brad Gilmore here from Back to the Future, the podcast. And if you're out there looking to rent a DeLorean time machine, well, let me tell you the number one place to do so. That's DeLoreanRental.com. DeLoreanRental.com, they have the DeLorean time machine all across the United States, from Los Angeles all the way to NYC, and even a few in the UK, Germany, France, Italy, and adding more cars daily. Check out their packages online to see what would be your best fit for your event. And I'm talking, man, if you need to go to whatever it is to have a DeLorean, if you're looking to rent a DeLorean time machine for a birthday, corporate event, wedding, anniversary, or party, whatever it is that you're looking for, just go to DeLoreanRental.com. Again, that's DeLoreanRental.com. It's the one-stop shop and place to get a DeLorean time machine for your special event. Do it today. Don't run out of time. Hit that book now button on DeLoreanRental.com to get a quote. Again, DeLoreanRental.com. That's DeLoreanRental.com. Hey guys, before we start the show this week, I want to remind you, April 14th is the big day, the big day. It is Back from the Future, a celebration of the greatest time travel story ever told, a book by me, Brad Gilmore, based upon a lot of the stuff that we talked about on Back to the Future, the podcast, and a host of more greatness and Back to the Future goodness. So if you want to get the book, go over to Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, IndieBound.com, or BackFromTheFutureBook.com and get yours today. You can get a copy today. You can pre-order it, and it'll be in your inbox, mailbox, wherever your box is. You can get it on April the 14th. So if you get this book and you like it, read it with a glass of milk. Chocolate.
As they said in the film, Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
Marty! You've got to come back with me! Back to the future!
Welcome back, guys, to Ben's Blind Spots, and this is the portion of the show that I make sure I'm live. Let me double check. Let me refresh this page over here. We're still not live. You know what? I love the suspense of this, just making sure everything is working, making sure we're actually live, making sure, I'm not just talking to an empty room, because we're all going a little crazy in this time right now. I don't see it. Guys in the chat, am I live right now? Are we live? There we go. Gosh, that took longer than usual. That's always fun. Super great way to start the show. If only I could edit that out. But here we are. Welcome back to Ben's Blind Spots, guys, where we talk about movies that I haven't seen, and they're just huge misses in my filmography. And we've had great guests on before. I've had Dan Merle on. I've had John Roca on. And you know what? I wanted a little bit more of a popcorn flick this time. We watched some real serious movies. Birdman, Wolf of Wall Street, real quote-unquote cinema, as Martin Scorsese would call them. No roller coaster theme park movies over here. But this time I wanted to have a little fun. I wanted to just kick my feet up and enjoy this quarantine. And I decided, you know what gets asked a lot in Inner Geekdom is Back to the Future 3 questions. Not really Back to the Future. It's always Back to the Future 3 for some reason. And I've never seen it. So I was like, you know what? For studying purposes, for just enjoyment purposes, I figured I had to watch it. And who better to talk to about Back to the Future than a man who's literally written a book about it. And that is Mr. Brad Gilmore. How you doing, Brad?
Hey, what's going on, Ben? I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to go over this blind spot with you. Back to the Future 3. I might reveal it in my book, but it's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites of all time,
Really?
Obviously, but it's one of my favorites of the trilogy. Yeah, I mean, you're from Texas, like me, and when you grow up in
Yes.
Texas, you have an affinity for westerns. You have an affinity for the kind
very
of
true.
old West feel. So for this, it kind of it was the best of both worlds. It was an action sci-fi adventure with a little bit of western in it. So I felt right at home.
That's very true. And let's dive into it. How do you rank these, Brad? How do you rank the trilogy? Now that I finally completed it after, 32 years of my life.
Man, it's hard. And I attempted when I was writing the book. Let me just put this up right here. When I was writing this book right here, Back from the Future, Celebration of the Greatest Time Travel Story Ever Told. When I was writing it, I was going to do a chapter where I ranked them. And I kind of broke down my opinions on why I thought this one was better than the other. you have to give credit to Back to the Future 1 as just a perfect movie. I think most people will say it's a perfect movie.
It is.
one
It
of
really
Dan
is.
Murrell's perfect movies. So I think that if the GOAT says it and the boat says it, then it has to be right. So then you go back and forth with 2 and 3. I think that I put 3 ahead of 2. And I say that for the same reason I put 3 ahead of 2 in the Indiana Jones trilogy, or the first 3 movies. The second one is a little dark from Back to the Future 2 and Temple of Doom. They're just a little dark for me. It doesn't leave you like feeling, oh man, what a great adventure all the time. Like, of course I love it. But Back to the Future 3 is just nothing but fun. It reminds me more of the first one than the second one does.
It is a pretty close comparison to like those 3 classic trilogies of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and because we'll forget about Crystal Skull, and Back to the Future.
Like that movie. I
don't hate it like other people do, but I still count it at Indiana Jones as a trilogy. We're like Crystal Skull is its own thing. Like I don't include the Hobbit trilogy as like Lord of the Rings prequels, even though they kind of are. Like it's its own separate thing. But you really can make some pretty direct comparisons to those with like New Hope, Raiders, and Back to the Future being pretty close to perfect starter movies and just great movies overall. And then you get the Temple of Doom and the Part 2 and the Empire that they're dark. They are dark movies, and you appreciate the risk those filmmakers took to take this lighthearted adventure series and just take a sharp left in there and be like, by the way, it can get grown up real quick. And then you do have like your Last Crusade, your Part 3, and your Return of the Jedi there are some stakes in here. There's still Nazis around. There's still space Nazis, and there's, a Wild West killer, but we're just having fun here.
Well, what's interesting though is even with 2 or Back to the Future 1 and 2 is there's some sad stuff in Back to the Future 1 when you look at the very beginning of the movie. George is a pushover. Lorraine's an alcoholic. Marty doesn't believe in himself all the way. And then you get to Back to the Future 2 when you go to the alternate 1985. Biff is essentially, and this is from the writer Bob Gale of the movie, he had Donald Trump in mind when he created Biff in the 1985 alternate 1985. It's who he modeled it after. Yeah. And so then you have that Biff horrific period, and Lorraine has cosmetic surgery, and she's getting beat on by Biff, and I mean it's all really really down. And then when you get to 3, there's not really a lot of dark spots in it at all. I mean it's about love and fantasy and hope and friendship, and there's not those dark themes that there were a little bit. And then even in Part 1, you have the whole Oedipal complex between his mom and him and Marty. That's not in 3 at all. So
at least in the first one, you don't think about that until you're older. Like the first time you watch it as a kid, you're like, oh, that's funny. Like he's hitting on his mom. Then you're like, 10 years later, you watch it, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. There's only one line that bothers me a little bit in the first one is when he first wakes up in 1955 and he sees Lorraine for the first time, and he's saying, "You're my ma, but you're so hot, you're so thin." And I was like, "Were you about to call your mom hot?" Like,
yeah,
that was the only like swing and a miss by Marty. But none of those are in there. You know what I mean? Like none of that is in Back to the Future 3. It's like pure fun the whole way through. Marty needs to prevent Doc from being shot. Okay, that's maybe the darkest element of it. But after that, it's all fun from there on.
Yeah. So before we do a deep dive into this movie, because I really had a blast watching it, and I want to hear your take on it. And honestly, your take on Back to the Future, because like I said, you've written a book on it, and I always want to know like how certain movies inspire people to write books. Like, I've talked to Ken about Star Wars and stuff like that. How are you holding up with everything, Brad? How have you been keeping busy? I heard that Texas extended or at least like a city in Texas extended their lockdown till May 20th. How are you keeping busy? How are you holding up, brother?
I mean, we're locked down in Houston, H-Town, Screwston. We're locked down until April 30th right now, so it hasn't been pushed. But I've been fine. I've just been here, doing a lot of Streamlabs with everybody. I've been on SEN. I've been on Backstage. I'm glad to do this show. Been doing my show, The Hall of Fame with Booker T. It was just WrestleMania this past weekend, so we got to talk a lot about WrestleMania and enjoy that. So
I will say,
go ahead.
I will say, as a non-wrestling fan and not watching WrestleMania, and I even tweeted this out, reading your tweets with no context was so entertaining. Because like you didn't hashtag WrestleMania, you didn't just like, oh man, that was wicked, and then that was it. I was like, okay, I'm sure that was like it was, and I being absolutely sincere. That was my favorite part of the weekend, was just reading your no context WrestleMania tweets.
Hey, man, the thing about it is, I mean, I've loved wrestling as much as I love Back to the Future, and working with Booker T, who's a legend, Texas legend, WWE Hall
Yeah.
of Famer twice over, being by his side for almost a decade now, 8 years, going on 8 years. It's something that I absolutely fall in love with. So I'm glad, and I understand like the risks and everything. And as long as everybody's safe, I'm glad that Vince McMahon was like, damn it, we're still going to do WrestleMania and give that to the people. And there's a lot of great stuff in it. So I've enjoyed watching WrestleMania. I've been catching up on old shows that I haven't seen it. I realized the other night, I love these USA shows, the cable shows that came on
They're
USA.
so good.
They're really good. Burn Notice is something I've been watching. Suits, Psych, Royal Pains. There's a lot of like really fun, watchable shows from the USA Network. So I've really been doing a deep dive on those as well.
I remember I was like dating this girl, and she lived in downtown, and I always go over to her apartment because she had like this nice high-rise apartment with a great view. And anytime we would hang out, she's always watching Royal Pains. That's about the two brother doctors, right? With Henry Winkler.
Mm-hmm.
That's such an entertaining show. That's such like a perfect, just like put on Netflix and binge show. And I feel like that way for all of USA shows. Suits, like you said, Psych. Psych is one of the best like
one of my favorite
marathon Sunday shows that you can like. I'm okay sitting through commercials with Psych because they're like both Dola Hill and I can't think of the other
James Roday.
James Roday, yeah. Like they're just so great together. And so yeah, you're right. USA is highly underrated when it comes to they're just watchable shows. They're just watchable.
They're fun. And I think and that's my thing. So I have like a deep admiration and respect for, as you said in your intro, like the real cinema of it all. But I'm somebody who, man, just give me something fun to watch.
Yeah.
I just enjoy these. I enjoy really stupid, fun movies. Like I like Fast and Furious. I like them all. I'll watch Tokyo Drift maybe more than all of them because it's the dumbest. I like
oh man, Ferris McDonald's been crazy.
There's a movie that came out in 1996 featuring a Back to the Future actor, Billy Zane, called The Phantom. Have you ever seen The Phantom?
Yeah, The Phantom. And
I love The Phantom.
Do you know the connection between The Phantom and The Shadow with Alec Baldwin?
I've never seen The Shadow. I've seen trailers.
Okay, so that dagger, the dagger that bites people, it's in the Phantom and The Shadow. There's two 90s comic book movie that they really tried to make happen, and neither of them really worked. But the dagger from The Phantom is also in The Shadow with Alec Baldwin. So like I think they were tiny bit trying to build an early cinematic universe back then of like the old 50s like noir superheroes.
I could dig it. I like The Phantom. And then you had a 1996 Catherine Zeta-Jones, which, oh brother. You have Christy Swanson, oh brother. Treat Williams, who, by the way, I was almost named after. So I enjoy all those movies. Yeah, my mother wanted to name me Treat. My names were down to either Treat or Boudreaux. And
how did you end up with Brad? How were we robbed of Boudreaux? Boudreaux Gilmore is the most southern name. Oh, get mom on the line. I got a bone to pick with her.
I know, right? My grandmother came in and saved the day. She actually, like, no joke, she said, "Hey, don't you like that actor? What's that actor's name?" And my mom's like, "Brad Pitt," and she's like, "Yeah." And so that's where the name came from. I was named after Brad Pitt, which I'll take.
Wow.
I'll take that. That's not a bad one.
Not at all. That is a nom de guerre right there.
So I just like these dumb, kind of silly, fun movies, and The Phantom's high up on the list. But movies like that, man, I can watch them all day.
And so that's a perfect segue. So what made you fall in love with Back to the Future? Because everyone that's ever seen that movie, it's at least enjoyable, if not to the level of perfect. Like movie mistakes besides, like, if you want to cinema sins this thing, go ahead, be my guest. But as a movie, time travel wise, if you want to break down the science of it, it's hilarious, it's heartwarming, it's dramatic. The action scenes are full of tension. And the score, let's not even talk about the score. What brought you to that next level of fandom with Back to the Future?
So I'm born in the early 90s, right? So I found these movies after they had all been released already. And the only thing that's interesting, which I think when I look back at it, why I made that connection was I'm born in the 90s. My sister was born in the 80s. My brother in the 70s. My oldest brother in the 60s, right?
Oh, so my gosh.
We're over 4 decades of Gilmore.
Right?
And my mother was born in the 50s. My father in the 40s. So I say that to say, when I watch this movie, it's about a kid in the 80s who goes back to the 50s. And I don't know, I guess I was able to connect with my family more because I saw things that were happening in the 80s where my brothers were both teenagers. My sister was born, so I understand more of the culture. And then my folks were both alive in the 50s, so I understood that time period a little bit more. And for some reason, I think that familial connection where I could watch it with all of my family and we all
Yeah.
found the same enjoyment out of it really made me go, huh. And then to be able to just sit there and enjoy these as for what they are. It's like you said, it's a time travel story. They're so rewatchable because all the little Easter eggs that change, from Twin Pines Mall to Lone Pine Mall, all these
Yeah.
things like that. And even when you go to Back to the Future 3, there's Eastwood Ravine and Clayton Ravine and Shonash Ravine, all these things. So I guess they're just really rewatchable for me, and I could watch them with my whole family because at the time when I'm a kid, I'm watching these Disney Channel original movies like Luck of the Irish and
Yeah.
in the 13th year. And my family doesn't want to watch these things. My brothers don't want to watch these. But when I say, hey, you want to watch Back to the Future, everybody was in. So I think that that's really where it started for me as a young kid, just being able to connect with my family. And then, like you said, they're so rewatchable. They're so fun. I always loved anything that Christopher Lloyd was in, whether it be Addams Family, Clue the movie, The Page Master with Macaulay Culkin. I like all those films that he was
Yeah.
in. So he was another one to me. And I don't know. It was just one of those things. You just find those things that you just connect with. And I connected with.
Now, speaking of Christopher Lloyd, was it a huge shock when you went from Back to the Future, seeing, the lovable, zany Doc, to seeing Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Judge Doom? Yeah. Well, was that because for me, even being a casual fan of Back to the Future, I'm like, oh, Christopher Lloyd, he's everybody's smart grandpa, and you just want to hang out and just hear about the Pythagorean theorem with him and hear about time travel. And then Judge Doom, and you see him murder a little squeaky shoe as it's begging for its life, and you're like,
yeah. He was great. Judge Doom is great. It's one of the great movie villains that, you know what? I'm glad that you said that. And I've never even thought about this, but I think that Judge Doom, it might be one of the great movie villains that doesn't get discussed enough. I don't think he gets discussed enough.
Especially in a movie that's supposed to be so lighthearted, surrounded by Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny and cartoon characters with all these zany antics. You have this guy that literally his whole thing is he wants to take a dump like a fire hose truck and just annihilate Toontown. It's crazy. And they just kind of skate over that. And even when the truck goes through the wall and there's little drips of what's it called? Dip dripping. And I was like, oh my, no one touched that. Cause he wants to kill every single Toon.
Yeah. And he was a self-hating Toon. He was a self-hating Toon. And I mean, you could really do a deep dive on that and comparisons throughout history of where Doom is from. But I think that you're right, man. He was so hateable in that movie. And for me, I don't know. It didn't click with me, I guess, because I knew that he was an actor. So obviously I know that actors play different roles, even as a child. So for him being the bad guy, I thought it was actually great casting. He nailed it. And it was a Robert Zemeckis film, so it made sense. But I actually I always thought about I was thinking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit the other day, and I was like, how did they pull off all that licensing? To have
I know that
Mouse
there's
and Bugs Bunny and
there's one story about Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse, and I remember that's the only thing I know about the licensing is that they had to be the exact same size. They had to have they had to be in the same position. I'm pretty sure they're in the same position the entire time they're falling, and they had to have the same amount of dialogue. So all these prerequisites were in for this 10 seconds of movie. These two studios had to just have this pissing contest about their main attraction cartoon characters, and they had to get the same amount of dialogue. They had to be the same size. Just everything went into that 20 seconds of Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Wow, I did not know. See, I've always wanted that. And I know there's been a script floating around for a while for a sequel, but I don't even know how you would be able to. Well, I guess Disney owns the world now, so it wouldn't be a problem getting all these things. Maybe not Bugs Bunny, but everything else. If you want
literally
Darth Vader
everything
in
else,
film. So I've always loved Roger Rabbit, but Christopher Lloyd, I don't know why, man. He was just someone who connected to me too. I think every kid when they were younger, they wanted to be Marty McFly. And I think I wanted to be Marty McFly, but just so I could hang out with Doc, Not because I thought Marty
Wow.
McFly was the coolest, but just because I wanted to hang out with Doc. I mean, who wouldn't want to hang out with Doc?
Right?
Christopher Lloyd said Doc was like constantly in crisis, and that's definitely like a good descriptor of him. But he's an inventor, and he made a time machine out of a DeLorean. I want to hang out with that guy.
Right. All right. Let's jump into Back to the Future Part 3 specifically, because we get to talk about this whole trilogy all day long, and I'm absolutely about it because Marty is the coolest with that. Like, those down vests made a comeback in the 90s, and I definitely got one from Old Navy and never wore it because I definitely wasn't as cool as Marty McFly. And, even in 2015, like, there were so many different versions of the day that, Marty went back to the future, or went to the future in 2015. And I was like, he didn't go back every single day of 2015, y'all. Like, every single day, I was like, today's the day Marty came to the future. It's like, no, it's not.
It was just one time.
It was one day.
Yeah.
So Back to the Future Part 3. Now, I will admit, I hadn't seen Part 2 in a while, so I had to get caught up of where Part 2 ended up. I went on IMDb and I was like, oh, okay, yeah. The guy in the rain left a note for him. He's back in the West. I got it. But I do love that literally this entire trilogy takes place over 2-3 days. Like, nothing stops. And that's very rare for a trilogy to be that continuous and to pull it off that well. So Marty goes back into the Old West to find Doc because he says he's happy, he says he's married, but a week later they find his headstone, and a week later he gets shot in the back by Biff's great-great-grandfather, basically. So he goes back, but the DeLorean gets the fuel. No more fuel, so they got to use the train. Marty overcomes him being called chicken by his doppelganger, his great-great-grandfather, his Marty McFly.
Yeah.
So, Brad, when you watch this, were you immediately hooked? For me, just looking back on this, because, I'm seeing it way later, there was a few too many references to other ones, like Doc saying Great Scott a few too many times, them saying Back to the Future and kind of winking at the camera. But I was okay with it because the movie was just so damn fun. So was it immediately right below Back to the Future, or did it take a while for you to enjoy this third part a little bit more?
Man, I was all the way in. And I say this too because I'm a big James Bond fan. And when you watch the Daniel Craig ones, there's Casino Royale, and then right after is Quantum of Solace. And I feel like I have to watch those back to back because they take place right after each other. And I actually think Quantum of Solace is a better watch if you watch them back to back. And with Back to the Future 3 and 2, the way that they end 2, like you said, with the Western Union man in the rain, and he says, I got a letter for you. And the way that they end it was so great because it's actually the ending of Back to the Future 2 is where I got the title for my book, Back from the Future, because after Marty gets that letter, he runs and finds the 1955 Doc that just sent the other Marty back to the future. And he said, and Doc says, I just sent you back to the future. And Marty goes, yeah, but I'm back from the future. And so I love the way that one ended. And then going right into Back to the Future 3, I was all in. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, 3 is when it gets zany and they go into the West. And sure, there's a lot of the tip of the cap moments, if you will, and a lot of, wait a minute, this is way too familiar. But I think that sequels, and I even heard Robert Zemeckis talk about this, sequels, people want to see the same movie again, but they want a new story. And so you have to figure out how to do that. And I think that all the Back to the Future films are fun. So I was all the way in on Back to the Future 3. And especially when they're doing the opening, you see the Gamble house, which is over there in Pasadena in California, where I actually went and saw it when we were doing a movie trivia Schmodown taping a couple years ago. And you see Howdy Doody time with Doc and just the way that everything begins. And then they go into the mine shaft. I was all in because it's like I said with the Phantom and all those other movies. It's a fun adventure film.
And I feel like this one is more of the adventure, because 2, like you said, this one is 2 and 3. You kind of need to watch them back to back just to you can literally, if there's a one Blu-ray that has both movies on it, it would just play seamlessly because you'd get that note and then it would cut back to Marty going back to the future and then Marty coming back and saying, I'm back from the future. And I feel like that'd be a great cut right there. You could go Godfather Saga like they do on AMC with that thing.
I think because also this movie was written, Back to the Future 2 and 3 was written as one movie. So it was actually going to be Back to the Future Paradox. And then they went to the studio and the studio was like, hey man, this is way too much for one movie. So they split it into 2 and filmed them concurrently.
Oh wow, I did not know that. See,
Yeah.
this is why I had Brad on the show today.
Mhm.
He's got all the goods. So
Right.
I'm such a sucker for westerns. I love westerns, and especially Doc definitely has the best entrance of all three movies in this one. Because you see him, like Old West Doc having that giant sniper rifle and just like, I could shoot the fleas off a hair dog, and I've got it aimed right at your head, Biff. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, Doc has assimilated into the West like a seal into water. I
Yeah, man.
love it.
It was badass Doc. And I think that was something that we were waiting on. You're waiting on Doc to have that moment, to have the George McFly moment from Back to the Future 1, to stand up for himself and get into his bag, his badass bag. And that's what Doc did. Yeah, it's pointed right at your head, Tannen. And he was great. And you knew it was Doc. I mean, you saw the white hair and everything, so you knew who it was, but the reveal was still great. I do agree. It was a great entrance. And I love after that where Doc says to Marty, who in the hell dressed you like that? You're liable to get shot. And then Marty goes, you did.
You did.
You did.
Yeah, like, okay, so I do have a question. I saw it in chat from Video Drew. He's married to his mom in the past. Isn't that his mother? He spent like, and she even says, I do have Streamlabs for questions, but I didn't even think of this, guys. Streamlabs.com/thebengoddard if you want to ask questions, but I do have to bring this up because it's such a good point. I didn't even think about this. Because so he spent all of Back to the Future like trying not to bone his mother, but then in the Old West, he already has. Like,
yeah. So the way that this is how I explain it is, Mrs. McFly, as she says, don't be forgetting the Mrs. The
yes.
Irish McFly in Back to the Future 3. It just so happens all the McFlys have a type, and their type looks like Leah Thompson. Which, hey,
I can't blame him.
It's
not a bad type at all.
So I don't. It's not. It's a happenstance, and it's a small California town. So who the hell knows? There may be a few generations removed, sure. But they just have a type. The McFlys have a type. That's what I say.
Gotcha. But I do like that because I was wondering how his great-great-grandfather or, whatever relationship he has to him was going to tie in, because it felt like he disappeared for a little bit of the movie. Then he comes back. And I do love that lesson because, I mean, you can say obviously better than me of what lesson Marty learned or how he grew in Back to the Future Part 2. But you saw George's growth, like just become his own man in Back to the Future. And then in this one, you saw Marty take that big mature step of not just being goaded into every single fight because someone calls him a chicken or yella or a coward. And I really love that development because as a moviegoer, you love when Marty gets challenged like that because a great scene is going to come up. The hoverboard race is going to come, or Marty's going to throw a great punch, or he's going to get out of this jam by doing something cool. But as a person, you don't really want him to get goaded into every single challenge because it's gotten him in trouble. It's gotten him into these predicaments. So how did you feel about Marty finally learning this lesson over hundreds of years, but only 3 days?
Right. So what's interesting is in Back to the Future 1, a lot of people say that, Marty doesn't change at all. Like he was a perfect protagonist. And I somewhat disagree with that. But in Back to the Future 2 and 3, the writers, Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis, definitely addressed that. And they put in this, he can't, take being called chicken or a coward or yellow or whatever. And I actually really like how it's played out over these two movies. And then that's why I think the payoff of it is so satisfying, because he learns from his great-great-great-grandfather, Seamus McFly, when Seamus tells him about that story about, my poor brother Martin, had he only listened, every time someone called him something, he flew off the handle or whatever the exact thing is. And that's what it took Marty from being called a coward or chicken by Griff. And then even the older Marty in 2015, Needles calls him out. What are you, chicken? And he gets fired, right? So he gets into this big bar fight, essentially. Then he gets fired from his job. And even in Back to the Future 2, Lorraine is telling Jennifer, everything went wrong when he got into that accident with the Rolls Royce and he broke his hand and he gave up on his music. And so you're wondering, oh, how did that happen? I wonder if it was because he was called a chicken. Then we find out at the end of this movie that's kind of what happened. So by the time that he realizes, I'm not doing this, when it comes to the gunfight with Mad Dog Tannen, I really like how they did that. And I like that they gave Marty something to overcome. I do. I think that it was needed. It wasn't as overt in Back to the Future 1. They added it in there, and I think that it made sense.
Yeah, and that honestly, those two things really go back into, you kind of need to watch Back to the Future Part 2 and 3 together, because I was real confused about the "you're fired" thing, about the Rolls Royce thing. I'd forgotten that, and I remember that scene where he's talking to his boss on the video screen, and he gets fired right there, or like he's yelling at him or something. And I also remember the pizza going in the oven for 2 seconds and then coming out fully baked, and I was like, boy, do I want that.
The pizza hydrator. We all wanted the Black & Decker hydrator. That's one of the things in because, a lot of things they predicted in the Back to the Future 2015 actually came true to some extent, right? But that was one that they didn't get right. And I wish that we had the hydrating of the pizzas.
That'd be so great. But that does go back to like how, like you said, like they basically wrote this one big movie and broke it up into 2 parts. And you can really see that with the "you're fired" thing, with the Rolls Royce thing, with Marty learning his lesson of like, hey, like even, however many years into the future, I'm still getting goaded into these fights just by words, like by people I don't know, by something that really shouldn't offend me, but it's just leading me down this terrible path, and it's eventually going to bite me in the ass. Like, luckily, Marty is a cool enough protagonist that he usually skates out of it, and Biff ends up covered in poop. But
God, some way or another, end up in some crap. That's gonna happen.
God, like that was the worst. Like I feel like they almost went too far when he gets covered and like Griff gets up and he's like, I hate manure, and like he out of his mouth was like, oh man, like they went there.
They had to, but it is interesting, and again, that's why I always suggest watching them back to back, because there's so many dropped lines, there's so many little hints. We even know what Doc's story is going to be in Back to the Future 3 and where he's going to go before we even know, because he's wearing a shirt that has horses and trains on it in Back to the Future 2, and then he even says, I need to find out, life's biggest question, women. I got to find out about, I got to, figure out women. And then we see that he goes through a romantic relationship in Back to the Future 3. So they definitely, and it's said so many times, but even if you go back to the first one, all the way through the third one, Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis made sure that any line of dialogue that they set up was going to have a payoff. And I've heard people say it's like screenwriting 101. You say something, it has an immediate payoff. And we saw it in Back to the Future 1. We saw it in 2 and 3. And this was the payoff for Marty to finally overcome. And at the end of the movie, when he's faced with Needles again, Needles was the guy who goaded him in 2015 to get in on the scam, and he got fired for it. He sees the same guy. They're both in their trucks, and Marty doesn't go for it. He's like, I'm not going to race that jackass.
Yeah.
And then that car almost hit him with the Rolls Royce. So it's very finely knit and weave story by the Bops.
See, like just hearing that, just because, like I said, like I've forgotten so much about too. Like hearing that, like it makes it such a better, complete story, and I really like that. That really brings a lot out of the movie for me. And so, where would you want if we did get? Because Christopher Lloyd is still kicking, Michael J. Fox is still kicking, Elizabeth Shue is still around, so is Bob Zemeckis. Jerry Goldsmith did the score.
Alan Silvestri.
That's right. Yeah. All these people are still around. Would you possibly want a fourth?
So this would be a preview of something I discuss in the book, but so another movie that I'm a huge fan of is Ghostbusters. And I love Ghostbusters too. I love them both.
I like them both too.
And then when I heard that they were doing the Ghostbusters in 2016 or whatever that was, I think it's now dubbed Ghostbusters Answer the Call. When I heard they were doing that, I'm like, cool. I love Ghostbusters. I'm down to see it, And I went into it wanting to like it. I didn't like that movie. I didn't think that it was great. I know a lot of people liked it. I thought it kind of sucked. And I'm like, man, that sucks. They went out there and they kind of ruined Ghostbusters for me. And then so that night I went home and I actually watched Ghostbusters 1. And I was like, no, it didn't. I still love Ghostbusters.
It's still a great movie.
Great movie. I don't care about this other one. I haven't watched Ghostbusters Answer the Call again. I don't ever plan on watching it again. But I was glad that they made the decision to try, and then they have the new one coming out now next year because of all this stuff. But and I'm excited to see that. And so I think the same thing with Back to the Future is if they make a new Back to the Future movie and it's phenomenal and it's awesome, I have more Back to the Future in my life. This is my
Yeah.
great favorite film trilogy of all time. Now we have a fourth one that's phenomenal. Now, if it sucks and I don't like it and they didn't do it justice, I still have the trilogy. I never need to
Yeah.
watch it again.
Exactly.
But if it's great, and there's more of it. So I'm not opposed to it at all with them making another one. I know that's like, I don't know, sacrilege to most people. But even if they wanted to recast and they wanted to go with Robert Downey Jr. and Spider-Man, why can't I think of his name?
Tom
all of a
Holland?
sudden? Tom Holland. Even if
Yeah.
they want to go with Tom Holland and Robert Downey Jr., or I even think that Eddie Murphy would play a great Doc. Even if they wanted to go down that,
that's good. That's an inspired choice right
I would
there.
really like that one. But even if they wanted to go down that way, I'd be fine with it. I'd be fine with it. I would definitely give it a shot. I'd go in with an open mind, and if they do it, they do it. Now, what I would like to see is they had the Universal ride of Back to the Future, where Doc opens up the Institute of Future Technology, and it's this whole, institute dedicated to time travel and inventions and stuff. So if they were ever do another one, it would be cool to see Marty and Doc working at this Institute of Future
Right.
Technology, and then they kind of pass it on to somebody else, or somebody gets a hold of the time machine, and hijinks are had by all. But I'd be fine with it. Now, where would they go? That's the thing I always think about. I don't know.
That was my follow-up. Like you are, so deep into this like mythos and lore of this. Do you have, I don't want to, if you have it in the book, that's a great little tease for your book. If you have any, you don't? Okay. I don't want to go too far into it, but do you have any ideas of like where, like what time period you would want them to go to, what adventure you'd want to go on, how Biff would be involved? Cause he's got to be involved.
He's got to be involved.
Yeah.
Well, the animated series, they do a lot of that where they go back to like the Civil War era. They go back to all these places, and there's always a Tannen somewhere who's involved as the bad guy. But it's hard, man, because if you can go more into the future, which is cool because we still don't know what it's going to be. So you can always play around with that. We know what the past is, but we saw the 50s. It would be kind of funny if a kid from 2020 who's 17 or whatever goes into the 90s or goes into the 80s.
Yeah.
And kind of relives that. But I feel like we sort of got that even with the X-Men movies. Where they
That's
were
the
going
thing
to the
is
60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s and all that.
You wonder, like, because I mean, in the 80s, like that, like the 50s was their nostalgia. Now that we're 30 years in front of that, now the 80s is our nostalgia.
Yeah.
And so, would you want him going to the 90s? Would you want him like going back to the 70s? Because I feel like the 70s is that missed decade where, yeah, we have disco, but other than that, what nostalgia do we have from the 70s? Besides disco? And I mean, I feel like that one, like we do the 50s, we do the 40s because you got the rolled up jeans and the baseball and American Pie, yeah, and then we've got the 80s of breakdancing and shopping malls and Technicolor, and then you got the 90s of like grunge and flannel, and then you got the 2000s. I want to see someone go back to the mid 2000s and enjoy Cisco and Limp Bizkit and be like, what is happening?
That would be funny. I would enjoy that. And you can relive the boy band renaissance of 98 Degrees and NSYNC and Backstreet Boys.
Absolutely.
But I think that you bring up the 70s. So in this original script, this Paradox script, they actually had it to where Marty goes back to the late 60s. Instead of going back into the first movie back into the 1950s, they actually go from 2015 to 1985, and then they find out that old Biff went to the 1960s and gave himself the almanac then. And Lorraine was like a flower child, and there was, Vietnam and Nixon and all these things going on in the world. And so they thought about going back to the 60s, and there's actually a script online, I think, where they go into that story, and you can find it. But I think that I would like to see 60s, 70s too, because, maybe not early 60s, because I feel like the Kennedy thing has been done to death. So 70s seems fun. Maybe Marty.
Great Scott, Marty. The DeLorean needs fuel, but we have to wait in a 40-car line because there's shortages.
Yeah.
That's the entire movie.
Jimmy Carter. But no, what would be fun though is if Marty goes back to the late 70s and he gets to like see Star Wars, be a part of that first run of Star Wars films. So like in 77, and you kind of get the craze of Star Wars. And because there was always the Star Wars references in Back to the Future 1, where he says, I'm Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan and all that
Yeah.
stuff. So you could tie stuff, be cute with it. But the future's fun and the past is fun. It's hard for me to really nail down a time period.
Like that'd be funny if like George Lucas was writing Luke Starkiller, which was his original name, and then
Yeah.
he sees Marty on the hoverboard and he's like, "Oh, Luke Skywalker, that's much better." And then just like little like dumb obvious Easter eggs like that is my favorite part of Back to the Future. Just like him, just name dropping stuff that we know how it affects the future.
Well, that would actually be funny. I actually like that a lot because
Yeah.
the way that they wrote the movie was with a note card method. So the Bobs would be in their office and they would just spitball ideas. And they said, "Hey, what if Marty invented skateboarding?"
Yeah.
And so they'd write on a note card and they say Marty invents skateboarding. And they put it on a bulletin board. And they're like, "Oh, well, if he invents skateboarding, we have to establish earlier in the movie that he can skateboard." So then they take another index card and they say Marty can skateboard, and they put it before Marty invents skateboarding. And that's how they plotted out the whole story of Back to the Future,
crazy.
believe it or not. Yeah. So like, when he invents rock and roll, well, you got to establish that he plays rock and roll and all these things. So I could see them working something, Darth Vader, Star Killer, Skywalker, all into it. That would be fun.
I'd love him to be doing like some boy band stuff, and then you see Justin Timberlake be like, "Hey, Lance Bass, listen to this.
Listen to it. Bye bye." That would be great. I would enjoy that.
Right.
There's actually a great podcast called Blockbuster. Have you ever listened to that?
No.
So it's by a guy, I think his name is Matt Schrader, and he tells the story of the friendship between, but it's a narrative. So it's like a cinematic experience. It's scored and everything, but it tells a relationship between George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and how they started out and how they, came up with Jaws and all the things through Jaws and John Williams' influence. And it's really cool. And it ends with, I think that Robert Zemeckis was like an intern for Lucas at one time. And it kind of leaves on a cliffhanger of, and then this guy, he goes on to do stuff like Back to the Future. I think you'd enjoy that. It's really fun. It's like 6 episodes.
That early director tree is so crazy. Like how they all knew each other, how they were all friends. They were all, like key grips or like interns or something. Yeah. It's honestly insane. But we've got a few Streamlabs questions here, Brad, for you. So this is from Ferris. I knew his ears would be burning as soon as you said Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. So, Boat, I heard you like Tokyo Drift. What was your favorite scene or sequence of the movie?
Favorite scene or sequence? Well, I like, actually, this is silly, but I like when Bow Wow goes to get his car out of like the revolving conveyor belt of cars. You know what I'm talking about? Where they go
so
to get
cool.
it out.
Yeah.
So the other day, they just built it. I don't know if they have them in California, but it was a couple months ago. I was driving back from my girlfriend's house, and they have a car dealership now called Carvana. Do you know what this is?
No.
So I'll send you a picture of it, but it's called Carvana, and it's the same thing. It's like it's a vending machine, and it's all it is you go up and you like type in an iPad which car you want, and you buy it with no salesperson or anything, and it vends it out of the machine for you.
Oh,
and you just drive it off the lot. It's called Carvana. It's crazy. So that's the scene that I think of, because I remember Bow Wow's car looked like the Hulk had smashed through it or whatever, and it had its fist and it was green. It was great. I really liked that. And what was funny is, so Booker T, the wrestler I work with, he traveled all the time, and he was telling me his first trip ever in wrestling was to Japan. So I was asking him like, "Hey, did you try this or did you do that or whatever?" And he's like, "Yeah, and then I get to the locker room and they all call me, over there they call you Gaijing and stuff like that." And I'm like, "Oh, I know what that means because I've seen Tokyo Drift. Gaijing, that means you're like an outsider, right, Book?" And he's like, "How'd you know that?" And I'm like, "Because I'm cultured, obviously."
Right? Yeah, I just play it like super cool. Be like, don't ask questions.
Yeah. So, I definitely love the Fast and Furious movies. There's a fan made trailer called, I think it's called Fast to the Furious. No.
Okay.
Fast to the Future, I think is what it's called. And it's like Vin Diesel as Marty McFly, and he's like he's in the DeLorean in Tokyo or something. Have you seen that?
No, but now this is the first thing I'm gonna do as soon as we're done here. But no, I do think Tokyo Drift gets overlooked a little bit just because it took a while for them to kind of put it in canon. Like Vin Diesel's at the end of it, but it was like, okay, what are we really doing here? But I do love that there's like real drifting in that. Like I remember seeing behind the scenes stuff, when you go to the theater too early and they've got like all the TV shows with Maria Menounos.
Yeah.
Like they were showing like them learning how to drift those cars. Like someone really drifted up that parking structure. I was like, because I feel like a lot of times the cars are understandably CGI because no one, Vin Diesel literally catches a car in this new one just like out of midair. He's like, nope, I'm good. Get out of here. Sorry, John Cena.
Yeah.
This Honda Civic can't crush me.
I think was it Fate of the Furious where The Rock is like, I don't know, he's hanging outside of a Jeep and he like turns around a missile or a torpedo. He does something silly at the end of that movie. I can't remember what it is, but I love.
Well, I mean, like in Hobbs and Shaw, he really grabs the helicopter. It's like, no, you're not going anywhere, buddy.
Yeah. These movies are so ridiculous, but I love them. I love stupid, fun movies like that. And I'm with you though. I like how they worked it in there. They figured out how to get Tokyo Drift into the movie. I really enjoyed it.
It's great. And like that Ferris, literally you'll get another one pretty soon, honestly, from our Patreon. So don't worry about that. The next two for Anthony.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, what were you gonna ask?
No. We'll finish the questions. I had something for you, but we'll finish.
Okay. Anthony Nugent, good day, Ben and Brad. I can't watch live. Just want to say I really enjoyed Back to the Future 3. Brad, you're the boat. Whether a yacht or a little tinny, who knows? Really excited about your book. Is there a way to purchase signed copies if either of you could go back? Oh, if either of you could go back in, it's two-parter. If either of you could go back in time and change one thing in your history, what would it be? Brad, thanks for changing my mind on fan-related content of the Schmodown. The rundown has become a must-listen to. Cheers, mate.
Oh, I appreciate that, Anthony. You can buy a signed copy from me. I have copies on deck right now. If you just hit me up on Twitter at Brad Gilmore, and I'll get a signed copy to you. We can figure it out that way. But as far as going back and changing something, I've gotten this question before. It's difficult, because I am, as silly as it sounds, the everything happens for a reason guy. And thinking like, if I didn't do this, I'm nuts sometimes, Ben. Like I think about, hey man, if my grandparents didn't move into this house and my mom didn't go there, then I wouldn't have gone to this school. If I didn't go to this school, I wouldn't have met this person. And then you know what I mean? I always like to like kind of break down like the weird consequences. Like even talking to you, like I wouldn't be talking to you if I didn't happen to find the AMC movie talk and then hear them talk about the Schmodown. And I mean all these weird things and how we get there. So I don't like to go back and think about what I would change too much because I really think that everything happens, in everything's destiny, or as George McFly would say, density.
No, I get what you mean because I like that reference there, by the way. I don't want to.
I'm full of them.
Because you're talking to a guy that had a date with a girl that he was super into, got ghosted, decided that, oh yeah, I was supposed to go get this x-ray because I wasn't feeling too well. So I got this x-ray. Turns out my lung was collapsed and I was 3 days from dying. And so I was in the so we don't need to go into that story, but I'm just telling you, I'm with you with everything happens for a reason. Cause I was like feeling real down about myself. And I was like, oh God, well, I'm not going on this date. I might as well go get this x-ray. And then everything else happened from that moment. But I will say, I got very lucky with that. But I will say that if I did have to go back in time, I think I would maybe 10 years, like not even too long ago, just maybe like either like postgraduate or something like that, where I'd either like just know what I wanted to do sooner, like be like an RB3. Like RB3 is, so deep in this game and is going to film school and is like got his fingers and everything doing project. That guy is like one of the hardest workers ever. And I'm so jealous of someone at that young, knowing that he wanted to be a director, knowing that he wanted to be in this industry from go. And maybe not from that aspect, but just knowing earlier in life of what I really wanted to do. Because it took me a while to find that direction. And now I'm here and I'm doing it and I love it. And maybe that was the thing, is that maybe I had to like grow up and mature to really like find this way. So I'm not opposed to that. But if I had to go back in time, it'd be that.
I mean, I think that's not bad. It's not bad to know what you want a little bit earlier. But again, all those small steps, even you trying to figure out what you wanted got you to the point that you're at today. It's so weird. It's so weird. I think about it all the time. But it's like there's a Kanye song off of Graduation where he says, "Everything I'm not makes me everything I am." And we all find our way somewhere or another. Even some of us earlier than others, but we find it. We figure it out.
Absolutely. Last one real quick from Lucas J. Shashik. Hey, Brad, no question, but I pre-ordered your book the day you announced it. I'm hoping in all the craziness that my copy arrives on time.
Yeah, I do know Amazon did reach out to me and excuse me, and I know that there's been like a slight delay depending on where you are in the country. It might come like 2 days after it's released because it's supposed to come like day of. It might come 2 days later, but bear with them. I know it's crazy
Yeah.
time. It's crazy time.
They're still doing their thing. Like my parents just sent me a care package today, so I just got that, and I think they like if you pay for the 1 day shipping or something, and if you pay for 2 days,
Yeah.
like the LED lights I have behind me, it took like 2 or 3 days to get there with Prime. So I think you should be fine, Lucas. They're still delivering. I think they're just prioritizing things. And also, make sure you washing your hands after you touch any package, because you've seen those videos of like delivery drivers like spitting on things or random strangers doing. World is crazy place, crazier than usual.
But if it doesn't come in time on Amazon, there is an Audible version of the book. There's an audiobook version that you can get as well. So you can always read the book that way if you don't want to wait on the copy to get to you.
Do you narrate the audio version?
I don't narrate it. So here's the funny thing is I asked them, I'm like, hey, are we going to do an audiobook version? And they were like, yeah. I'm like, sweet. And then I didn't hear really anything about it until a week ago. They said, hey, just want to let you know the audiobook's ready to go on Amazon. People can pre-order it. And I was like, oh, okay. Sweet.
That's
and
like
randomly, it happens to be a guy. His name's Joe. He happens to live like an hour away from me here in Houston, even though the publisher's based in Miami and the distributor for the audiobook is based in LA. Somehow someone in Houston ended up reading it. So you still get a Texan reading the book. Yeah. It's just not me.
God, what? It's like one of those like backhanded compliments of like, hey, your audiobook's ready to go. No, you didn't read it.
Yeah. We're not going to go to the guy who hosts a Back to the Future podcast and is a professional radio host. We're just going to get somebody else. And actually wrote the book.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fine though. You know what though? And maybe you can agree or sympathize with me in some ways. I am so self-critical about work that I do. Like I can't go back and watch any episodes of reality wrestling. I don't listen to podcasts. I do. I was in music for a long time. It's hard for me to go back and listen to songs. And so for the book, when I wrote it, I sent it to the editor. They sent me back some little notes, fixed it. And then I don't even want to read a word of it, because really? I'm going to read it. No, I can't because I know I'm going to read it and say, oh, I should have talked about this. Oh man, I should have put this in there. Oh no, that's not the point exactly. Because the book in my head is different from everyone else. Because everyone else, they don't have expectations. Me, I had I might look at things a different way. The book is great though, because I wrote it, but because I'm the host. So it's like the best of all time.
Well, but, it's like those moments after an argument in the shower and you're like, I had him. Just say this right here, and I would have got him.
Yeah. It's like I don't know if you're a Seinfeld fan, but it's like that episode where George thinks of the comeback while he's like driving home. And he's like, I should have said that.
And like that's a go back in time moment right there. It was like, let's have the same argument, and this time I'm gonna get you.
yeah. There you go. Yeah, maybe I could have think of an argument that I could have had with maybe my girlfriend where I should have said something or not said something.
Yeah, it's the not said something with the girlfriend.
yeah, for sure.
All right, we got some Patreon questions, guys. But if you got more questions, streamlabs.com/the Ben Goddard. We've got the Back to the Future expert right here with us, and I want to get some good questions for him for sure. First up on Patreon, Alec Miller. What up, Bo? Glad to know we share an undying love for our 2017 world champion Houston Astros.
Hell yeah.
What is your... Everyone take a shot. The Astros got mentioned. What is your favorite scene from the entire Back to the Future series? Keep making H-Town proud.
Okay, first of all, of course, 2017 World Series champions. The Astros, man, you gotta love it. And look, y'all made that big stink about, take the trophy away. Well, now the whole season's taken away.
It's gone.
You got what you wanted.
No one's happier than the Astros that aren't getting thrown at right now.
Oh, I know, right? Bless those brothers. Bless those brothers. My favorite scene. I do have
one second.
I do have a favorite scene.
A few comments. few comments right here, just a few. No big deal.
There's a great saying: if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
That's
You know what I
true.
mean? And so, it's sorry that your team didn't win. They're all unfiction or whatever you say your name or commentating or whatever. We won. You can't take it away from us. And it's just a piece of metal, damn it. No, but as far as a favorite scene, I do. So it's Back to the Future 1. Marty wakes up after getting hit by Lorraine's dad, and he goes downstairs. They're all having dinner, and this whole scene is my favorite. Yeah, that's right, Danny. Texas Forever.
That's right.
This whole scene's my favorite. Is at first where he's asking where Riverside Drive is, and his future grandfather says, "Oh, Riverside Drive, that's a block past Maple," and then Marty goes, "Block past Maple, that's John F. Kennedy Drive," and his grandfather goes, "Who the hell is John F. Kennedy?" I love that line. And then Lorraine grabs his thigh, grabs Marty's thigh.
Yeah.
And she's like, "He could stay in my room." And he grabs his thigh and he gets up and he leaves. And he's like, "Oh, y'all been great. Y'all been great. Love you. Bye." And he leaves. And then his grandmother goes, "What a strange young man." And then his grandfather says the best line of the entire trilogy. He goes, "He's an idiot. Comes from upbringing. His parents are probably idiots too." It's my favorite line from Back to the Future. And I've said it so many times. I've said it on the rundown. I've said it on commentary for wrestling. I've said it so many times. It was funny, Ben. There was a wrestler named Shawn Hendricks who was wrestling for us. And we were just talking about movies, and he's a big movie fan. And he said, we're talking about Back to the Future. And he's like, I've never seen Back to the Future. I'm like, "How have you never seen Back to the Future?" He's like, "I just haven't. We're the same age." I said, "Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. Tonight in your match, I'm going to make as many Back to the Future references as I humanly possibly can. And I want you to go back and watch your match, watch Back to the Future, and then rewatch your match and see how many you picked up on." I mean, I said all kinds of stuff. I even had my commentating partner set me up on stuff. I'm like, Shawn Hendricks is a great communicator. Some people would say he's like Ronald Reagan. I said, "Ronald Reagan, the actor?"
The actor?
I do all that stuff. I mean, it's so cheesy, but I love doing that. So, but that's definitely my favorite scene in the movie, where he just goes, "He's an idiot. Comes from upbringing. His parents are probably idiots too."
That Ronald Reagan line might be up there for me, but honestly,
Right.
it's gotta just for a casual fan, it's gotta be that first skateboarding scene where he's running from Biff's gang and he grabs the truck and he's skating behind it, and then when he jumps on the car, jumps on the hood, jumps through the back seat, and lands back on the skateboard. Who hasn't wanted to try that? And hopefully no one has, because it doesn't work. That's not how physics works, people. But you don't care in that moment. It's and especially with the score just peaks as he's jumping on the car, and it's so great. But yeah, that Doc line is so great, because like he's already thinks he's crazy, and he thinks he's got like this ace in the hole. Ronald Reagan, the actor, like he pulls himself up to full Christopher Lloyd height to say that. Like it's like this trump card of like, "I got you now."
Yeah. And what's funny is it's another like one of those things, like when he gets to Hill Valley and he's in Hill Valley Square in 1955, he looks up at the marquee, and there was a movie playing starring Ronald Reagan. Was on the marquee, so it's fun just to always bring those little Easter eggs together.
It's so good. The movie's so good.
It's
Ferris
phenomenal.
Muthana, we know that you have known Booker T for 10 years, and I'm a massive fan of him. What is your favorite gimmick of his? And then I've got another one about Fast and Furious and Ferris, but we'll focus on Booker, because I do want to know, like, also like what Ferris asked, what's your favorite gimmick of Booker's? And then how'd you get involved with Booker T? Because even as a casual wrestling fan, coming from someone that younger, like loves that movie Ready to Rumble with David Arquette, and you see Booker and Goldberg and Sting, and you're like, it's an amazing movie.
Yeah. Well, okay. So my favorite gimmick of Booker. So the thing about it is, when you get to know him, he's honestly the same exact person that he is on TV. He's exactly the same. So when he did the King Booker thing, so for a while he won this tournament called the King of the Ring, Ben, and then he decided to actually become a real king. So he starts talking in a British accent and stuff like that, and he went by King Booker, and it was hilarious. But then when someone would piss him off, he'd get kind of like go back to his H-Town street mentality, start yelling at him, without his accent. So I love the King Booker thing. But I John Cena is in Ready to Rumble, by the way. I saw that in your chat. He has a cameo in Ready to Rumble. But
John Cena's back then?
When they go to find Goldberg in the gym, John Cena is one of the guys working out in the gym. And I think it's because he was training. I think the company was called UPW, I believe, in California, in Southern California at the time. He was training there. So I'm sure when WCW came to town to film, I'm sure they just
That's
went to the
crazy.
local promotion. But I met
Yeah.
Booker. I met Booker back in 2012, and we met because I was doing local radio here in Houston on an online station. I'm a big hip hop guy, so I was doing a hip hop show on online radio, and I was doing these hip hop shows. And then I was always a wrestling fan growing up, like everybody. I fell out of it when I was more of a into girls, I guess. And that was like the majority of the focus of my life. So I fell out of wrestling. And so it was 2012. I hadn't watched it maybe 5 or 6 years. And I just woke up one morning and you wake up sometimes and you scroll through Twitter and you're like, your notifications, you're like, who needed me when I was asleep? I want to know what was going on. What did I miss?
Yeah.
And so I'm scrolling through Twitter and I see something from WWE and I'm like, oh, cool, WWE. And because I followed them. And then I saw them tweet out something about Booker T. I'm like, oh man, Booker T. He was the dopest back in the day. I was like, my first event I ever went to, Booker T was in the main event for the World Championship against Rey Mysterio. So I'm like, man, I wonder what Booker's doing. So I click on his profile and it's like, hey, my company here in Houston is looking for announcers. If you know anybody, email this email. And I'm like, oh man, that would be cool to be a wrestling announcer. So I sent an email off with like a little resume of, hey, I did this, I did that. I might have lied on my resume a little bit. And
you got it.
Just a little bit. And I didn't think about it. I didn't think about it. And then it was like 3 weeks from them. I got a call from some guy and he's like, hey, is this Brad? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, hey, my name's Paul. I work with Booker T. Can you come down and meet him tonight? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I ended up going down there and Booker ended up getting called out to go to SmackDown or something. So I didn't get to talk to him that night. And then they said, hey, can you come back Thursday when Booker's going to be here? So I'm like, sure. So this is on a Tuesday. I woke up on a Wednesday. And this is like, I guess behind the scenes a little bit is you talked about your x-ray and your collapsed lung. I woke up that Wednesday and went through my second bout with Bell's palsy. And Bell's palsy is a condition where half of your face is temporarily paralyzed.
Yeah.
And so I woke up and like I couldn't move like the left side of my face at all. And so I'm like, oh, crap. And I wasn't even worried about my health because I've been through it before. The only thing I was worried about was I have a meeting with Booker T tomorrow and I can't move my face. And so I went in there and I met with Booker and I tried to do as much as I could. And, he was like, hey, man, you're a good looking kid. We could use you. We have a show this Saturday. Come to the show. And it was great. And then afterward, his second in command, his name's Kevin. Shout out to Kevin. We're best friends now, but he called me aside. He's like, hey, man, do you have like Tourette's or something? And I'm like, no, my face is frozen. I was hoping no one would notice.
Tourette's
because the thing is,
of all this doesn't make sense.
Well, I'll tell you why. Because when you have Bell's palsy, you can't blink with that side of your face, right? It takes everything in your body to try to blink. Seriously, every muscle, you're like, trying to blink. And so at one point I tried to blink and I probably looked like a crazy person. And so he was like, hey, do you have Tourette's? Shout out to everybody who's living with, daily conditions. But
yeah.
So for me, that was the first time I met Booker when I had temporary facial paralysis. And then we got along. He ended up getting a radio show and he knew I did radio and he called me and, we've been close ever since. He's somebody I talk to every single day. For hours on end, we'll just get on the phone and talk about wrestling, talk about life, talk about whatever. And it's crazy because to me, he was like you. He was like, that's Booker T.
Yeah.
It's Booker T.
Booker T.
And, and when his name calls, I still am like, oh man, it's Booker T. Let me hurry up and answer, even though I've known the man for, almost 10 years.
That's so crazy. That's awesome though. That's a great story. All right. Second question from Ferris. Also, do you like Fast and the Furious? What was the theme that drove you to Back to the Future?
What was the theme?
Yeah.
From Fast and Furious? What's the question?
What was the theme that drove you to Back to the Future? So I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, like what got you into the Back to the Future was about you connecting with your family and stuff like that.
Definitely. I think, and that's me retrospectively looking at it. I didn't think about that at the time because obviously I was a kid, but I think that going back and having a family that's so spaced out, I mean, like I said, my brother's 23 years older than me. And finding common ground.
So nuts.
Finding common ground with somebody 23 years older than you is hard enough, especially when they're your brother. And, at the time, he was already working on becoming a doctor and all that. So it was like there wasn't a lot that we could connect on. And 80s movies, Back to the Future, hey, that's something we could connect on. So that's me retrospectively looking at it. But also, I think that everyone dreams of having a time machine. I think that's just like a normal thing. And
Oh yeah,
when you
absolutely.
and here's the thing, I like all time travel movies too. I like Time Cop. I like
Time
any of
Cop's
those
great.
movies. Time
Yeah.
Cop is so cheesily bad, it's phenomenal. So I think it's a genre that I like too. So I didn't mind. I don't mind the genre as well. So I think that probably adds to it a little bit.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Ferris again. Hey, Brad, can you help us settle debate? Is cobbler a pie but with a different name? And if cobbler is different than pie, which do you prefer?
Oh, that is great. That's a great question. I think that it is different than pie. There's some small differences. It's very close.
Yeah.
I am not a big dessert guy at all in general, but I
Really?
will. Yeah, I'm not. I'm a salt and sour guy, right? I'm not a
Got it.
big
Got it.
sweets guy, so I like chips more than I like a cheesecake. But definitely peach cobbler is a Southern specialty.
I feel like that's a
Yeah,
perfect
yeah.
question for a Texan.
Yeah, you know that you gotta eat grandma's cobbler. When grandma makes some peach cobbler, you gotta go ahead and eat it. And my
Yeah.
grandmother's from Alabama, and they even have a little bit different way of doing it down there. So I definitely enjoy peach cobbler if it was made by my grandmother.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
Got a Streamlabs here from Alec Miller. My first wrestling event ever was when Booker first started his wrestling company. I believe he had Umaga there, and me and my dad met him, Booker and Charmel. It was awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that was probably the PWA days because Booker's been running his own promotion since 2005, and I've only been part since 2012 when they rebranded to Reality of Wrestling. But yeah, man, Booker Charmel, it's like a family operation.
Okay.
Charmel is Booker's wife, and she's phenomenal. That woman has a phenomenal story. I wish that more people knew about her story. She's somebody who grew up in Gary, Indiana, same town as Michael Jackson, went on to become Miss Black America the year that Mike Tyson had his whole fiasco with the Black America pageant, but she became Miss Black America, then became a professional dancer for James Brown, toured the world with James Brown, and then she ended up in WCW and she choreographed all the dance scenes in Ready to Rumble. And that's when her and Booker met. And then she's been in wrestling ever since. But that woman, and she graduated summa cum laude from her university with a degree in mathematics. So she's like super smart. She's a phenomenal woman. So definitely whoever got to meet her, shout out to you.
Man, what a life.
Yeah.
Brandy Parker, how did you get into wrestling, and then how did you get into commentating on it? Same with MTS.
Oh, that's a good question. So, I mean, I told the story how I kind of got into wrestling, meeting Booker, and then I was like the lowest man on the totem pole on a wrestling show is the ring announcer. You're the lowest man on the totem pole. No one really cares. You're just there to say names and say who wins. It's a very simple job. Although the people who do it really well, you know, like the Bruce and Michael Buffers of the world, obviously they deserve their respect. But like at a wrestling show on an independent level, you're like the least important guy. So I came in as the ring announcer because the other ring announcer got strep throat. So I tried out to be the commentator. I sucked at it. I was terrible. And then their ring announcer got strep throat. So that's how I got the job as ring announcer. And I was that for a while. But again, I just kind of stayed. I didn't know all the customs in wrestling at the time. I didn't know that you don't speak unless you're spoken to. I didn't know you have to shake everybody's hand when you get to the building. I didn't know all these things. So for me, I'm just a super fan getting to do ring announcing. And I treated Booker like he was Booker T, and like I was Brad Gilmore, and he was just like another guy, but I had all these questions for him because I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. So I want to ask him all these questions. And I think that that's when he kind of took a liking to me because he was like, oh, wow, he's like just asking me questions and that I would like to answer to that no one asked me. And then one day we were doing this Comic Con where we were going to do 4 weeks of television tapings in one day. And 6 weeks of television tapings in one day. And the commentator couldn't show up. And so Booker calls me as I'm driving to the George R. Brown Convention Center and says, hey, you're doing commentary tonight. And I was like, okay. I was like, who's going to ring announce? He's like, it doesn't matter. We'll figure it out. You're doing commentary tonight. I was like, okay. So I had to show up there and fly by the seat of my pants. And the first time I did it, it was more of like me doing an impression of what I thought a commentator was.
Yeah.
And then the director called me aside. He's like, hey, man, I talk to you backstage all the time. You're like a super engaging and personable guy. Just do that. Just be yourself out there. Don't like do an imitation. So then when I went to do the next set of tapings, I kind of fell into it. And the guy I work with, Matt Topolsky, who's the other commentator. Now we've been working together, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, however long it's been. And yeah, man, it's really fun. And I got to play the heel commentator for a long time. And that was like a whole host of fun.
Yeah. And then follow up. How'd you get into the Schmodown?
Oh, the Schmodown. Yeah. So I was watching something on YouTube about my girlfriend and I were on vacation somewhere, and I'm terrible because I have to like watch television to go to sleep, and she can't do that. So so I had to turn the TV off, and I'm just like listening or watching stuff on my phone. I mean, so I'm just like
Yeah.
on the side, like one earbud in, watching.
Yeah.
And I found something. I was just trying to find something to listen to, and I saw something called AMC Movie Talk, or maybe in Collider Movie Talk. I don't know. It was right. It was around the same time, so I don't know exactly when it was. But I started watching that, and then they were talking about John Campea versus Dan Murrell in the movie trivia Schmodown for the championship, and I'm like, what is that? It sounds ridiculous. And so I ended up clicking on the video because I guess it was already published,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, this is like wrestling. This is like exactly like wrestling except with movie trivia. And I actually remember sending Christian an email. He didn't know me from Adam at all, but I found like a contact email on the Schmoes website, and I emailed him and I said, hey, my name's Brad Gilmore. I work with Booker T. I saw the movie Trivia Schmodown. I love it. Maybe there's some way that we can cross promote. We have a YouTube channel too. Maybe Booker can do something on your show. I don't know. And then and yeah, so then I sent that off, and Christian was like, hey, if Booker wants in, he's in. And then I could tell though Christian probably didn't take me seriously because he's like,
Yeah.
I don't know this guy, and he knows Booker T, sure, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so then we ended up doing something for like a stat segment or whatever it was, the keys to victory, and sent it in. And he's like, oh my God, this is great. And then Christian called me, and he had all these ideas, and that's when he and I kind of started connecting. And then the Schmodown Rundown was already a thing, and Aaron Turner was hosting it at the time. And I think that Aaron couldn't make it one week, or somebody couldn't make it, and they asked me to be a guest on the show because we had started talking over Twitter, and they knew I was a wrestling guy and a movie trivia Schmodown fan.
Yeah.
So they said, hey, you want to come on the show? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I remember doing that. And then Aaron ended up leaving the show completely a couple weeks later, and I got a call from Christian saying, hey, do you want to be the new host of the Schmodown Rundown? And at the time, I'd only been watching for a couple months, so I didn't know a whole lot about it. I just knew how to host a show. So I said, sure. And so then me and Frank got together, and we just ended up fitting together, and we had another guy on the show at the time, Brian, and it didn't really work out with him. So we kind of, he left the show, and then it was just Frank and I, and we figured it out, man. Frank and I have a really great chemistry. We taped the rundown earlier today, and it's always a fun time to sit down with numbers.
Yeah, for sure. That's so crazy, like that. You literally just happened to stumble upon the very first, like that was the first studio movie trivia Schmodown. Like that was the first off the couch one, basically, was Dan versus Campea. So like the fact that you just happened to stumble across it one day was amazing.
It was crazy because, and I think that's another reason Christian and I have so much respect for what he's built and what he continues to build, and the vision that guy has, and his creativity. But I think that we connected and got along so well is because he worked obviously in WWE, and he understands wrestling, and that's what the movie trivia Schmodown was. And I was like, oh, I got it from day one, right? Like I know some people like I know you're not the biggest wrestling guy, and you came more from the trivia movie side.
Yeah.
And so and that was the world that was foreign to me. The character aspect and the wrestling part of it, I got instantaneously because it's like it's what I do. I understand it. And that was what drew me in. I was the guy who liked watching the promos more than the matches for the longest time.
Yeah.
I like seeing the character work and all that. And now obviously I have a tremendous amount of respect for everybody who plays within the game, yourself included. And I think that this year I hope this whole thing goes away soon because there's so many great matches.
Right. We were gearing up for like that, like those first two live events were some of the best we've ever had. That three-way, and the triple threat, a better way to put it. And then the Atlanta match was probably like the best live event, with like most exciting live event we ever had, with the overtime for a championship, and the Inner Geekdom undercard was great too. And then with the draft and everything, like we were really gearing up for something special. And I hope that we can still find that momentum in this latter half of the year, because I'm really looking forward to it.
Man, we were talking, and I'll let the people hear it on Rundown, but we were talking about all this great rookie class too, which is you and Barbarian and the match that goes up with Brittany and Jader and Keaton Markey, and there's so many great rookies. And There's some big clashes I want to see, man. I don't know. We got like a tease of it. I don't know if we're going to see you in the Barbarian, but that's a match that I'm like, oh, man. Here's the thing, dude. If that match were to occur and you beat the Barbarian and y'all continue in your team's run, I mean, I said on Rundown, so I'm giving it away a little early. I was like, Ben Goddard is Rookie of the Year. He's got it. He's right there. Like, he's on the precipice of locking that in. There's only one challenge I see. I see maybe Robert Parker has a lot of buzz around him. So I'll see what he does next week. But as of now, I think you're leading the contention for Rookie of the Year.
I think if we get, I'd say two or three more teams, like if we get 2 more teams win, we're in the number 1 contender shot. That's the thing. It's if we beat, I believe, has it been announced if we're playing the Real Rejects or not? I know that was a possibility, but I don't know if that's been announced. I know that like it might be out there, but we might be playing the Real Rejects next. And if we beat them, and I think then we'd play the winner of Deep 13 and the Lon and Paul. What's their out of school or whatever it's called?
Final Exam?
Final Exam. There, dude had something to do with school.
Yeah.
It'd be like Final Exam and Deep 13, I'm pretty sure, playing each other because they both won. And then we might play the winner of that if we beat whoever we're playing next, the Real Rejects, because I think they beat Cuckoo's Mess. I don't know how the brackets work. I just show up and play. That's all I do. Because I'm a heel.
I'm a heel.
I'm a heel.
That's what you do. But yeah, man, I think that the season's going so well right now. So I'm excited to see once things pick back up, and I'm excited for these exhibition matches too, man. I'm ready to lay. Are you in any of the exhibitions?
Yeah, I'm in the Lord of the Rings one. It's gonna be fun.
That's right.
Oh god, like I thought. I was very glad that Rachel's on in this because good, I only have to face Robert Parker, Alex Damon, and is it Smets in the Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, I think so.
It's like only those guys. I guess I'll try and throw my hat in that freaking ring. Holy crap!
Oh man, yeah. That I'm excited. So I only have one goal. So we're actually
Brad, you're cutting out. You're cutting out a little bit.
Can you hear me?
I got you.
Okay, are we good?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Yeah. I'm playing a Back to the Future match with Kevin Smets, Mark Andraco, and Frank Janish. I know I'm going to be in that one. If I win that one, that's fine. I'm not even going to study for that one. I don't even care to study. I did write the book on Back to the Future. So I mean, hopefully I do well on it. Hopefully I do well. Kevin Smets is a beast, so whatever. The one that I really am focused on is this James Bond exhibition. I'm playing Tim Franco, Emma Five, and Mike Kalinowski. And I want to destroy Mike Kalinowski. Every time that Bond has come up on the wheel for him and for anybody else, I've always gone perfect on it. I've always gone perfect. Okay. On it. I've even gotten one. Even Mike, after one of his matches, came up to me and was like, "You got that Bernard Lee question, didn't you?" I'm like, "I sure did, brother. I sure did. That's the one you missed."
What a perfect way to answer to. I sure did, brother.
I sure did, brother. So that's what I want. I just want, and you know what? I don't even care really if I win the Bond one. I just want to beat Mike. That's all I want to do. I just want to prove to him.
I will say that probably is the one that I'm most excited about, is because I've heard Emma say how much she knows about Bond. I see Tim Franco in the SCN chat every day saying how much like he wants to play Mike and Bond. And then I'm excited to see what you have in that one too. Like I didn't know until recently how good you were at Bond. So I think that one, out of all of them, like the Champions match looks like a lot of fun. I'm excited for Lord of the Rings, Back to the Future, rom-coms. There's so many great ones.
Yeah,
but
Jurassic
Park. That Bond one. Which one?
Jurassic Park. I'm excited.
Oh, yes. I thought about throwing my hat in there, but I'm like, I don't want to watch Jurassic World Part 1 and 2 again. If it's only that first movie, I'll marathon that bad boy all day. But the rest of them, I'm good.
I know that's the kind of the crappy thing about Jurassic Park is the first one was excellent. I mean, excellent, beyond excellent.
And then all the other ones are like another one for perfect movie for me.
Yeah, I think Jurassic Park's up there, and then all the other ones are just kind of like,
yeah, they're varying degrees of fun, but like it's that first Jurassic Park it's so great. All right, another Streamlabs from Ferris Mathana. Hey, Boat, big fan. What matches or storylines would you give a novice wrestling fan to watch to bring them into the fold like me?
Oh, okay.
Not Ferris, like me. Like you said, like Goddard.
Oh, like you to watch a novice to watch storylines? Well, storylines are interesting because they play out over a period of months at times. But I think that you want to watch some great heel work, and I think that there was no one better. No, heel Rock is great, but he's too lovable because he's the Rock. Even like I actually watched this promo the other night where he goes out to Toronto, and he's a bad guy at the time. Like he had just screwed Hulk Hogan the night before, and so he's this bad guy, and he goes out in front of the crowd at Toronto, and they're already cheering him. He's like, "Wait till you hear what the Rock says before you cheer him." And then he's like insulting Toronto, and they're still like, "Yeah," he's saying Toronto. It was great. But good storylines are people. Well, if you want to go watch great heel work, go watch Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon is the greatest heel in the history of professional wrestling.
But he's like a legitimately terrible person too.
No, he's not. He's not. Those are all rumors and innuendo. But when you go watch his heel work, and this is a guy who's not a trained performer. He wasn't even a trained wrestler. He was just somebody who's around it his whole life, and the way that he could manipulate a crowd was phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal. He's one of the best. Roddy Piper's one of the best. But if you want to go watch a match about great heel work and how to really portray that, there's a WrestleMania 13 Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in a submission match. Bret Hart walks in the good guy. Austin walks in the bad guy. Bret Hart walks out the bad guy. Austin walks out the good guy. It's one of the most incredible things you'll ever see in wrestling. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
All right, I'll definitely look that up because you're right. Even because everyone smells what the Rock is cooking. It doesn't matter what your name is, all this stuff. Like those are heel tactics, but the Rock is just so lovable. Like so even when the funniest thing is whenever you see a response on Twitter and it's the Rock going, "Shut up, bitch."
No, it's my favorite. Oh my God, it's my favorite. So Dwayne, I'm even wearing a Dwayne Johnson jacket right now from Under Armour.
Yeah, he makes great Under Armour is great stuff.
Oh, he's phenomenal. He's the best. He's not the best overall of all time, but he's the best talker. He's the best promo guy in the history of professional wrestling. I mean, it's almost sacrilege to say he's better than Ric Flair, but he is, man. He's so good in the way he could manipulate a crowd. He was like, and if you listen right now, they are chanting his name. And at the time, the crowd's not chanting his name. But when he says that, the whole crowd starts going, "Rocky, Rocky, Rock." I mean, he knew how to manipulate them so well. I've never seen anybody since or before who could do it that great. Ric Flair was phenomenal. He really was. But The Rock is by far. I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah.
It's not even close how good he is at doing that.
He's just like, and that's the thing, like that's a casual wrestling fan dream is The Rock, of someone that can easily get someone into wrestling. Is just like listening to his promos are so great.
Oh, and the thing is he was the one who embraced sports entertainment, right?
Yeah.
But that's what wrestling is. We know it's, what it is, right? We know it's predetermined. We know that it's not a straight up legitimate competition, although the guys put their bodies through incredible abuse. And I have so much respect for everybody.
It's definitely a sport. Just because it's scripted doesn't mean these guys aren't incredible athletes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's no different. I mean, rhythmic gymnastics is an Olympic sport. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a choreographed routine that involves no bumps. This is a choreographed routine that sometimes is completely improvised. That is very hard on the body. But as far as just The Rock embraced the entertainment side. He knew that if you're going to buy into me, if you're going to want to see me wrestle, you have to buy into me as the personality. And I think a lot of times when I see some people say, "Oh, I don't like the wrestling aspect of the Schmodown," or "Why do we have to have characters?" or "Why do we have to have these cutscenes?" It's because you're becoming emotionally invested. You're finding you're becoming, like I said, attached to these characters, or you want to root for him to win. Like Dan Murrell can never be a heel because he's just so likable. You always want him to win. You just want him to win. And then you have people like at the time, Andrew Guy, who was such a great heel, but you just wanted to see the man lose. It's like, and when he got hit by the chair, the whole crowd goes crazy. So that's why the heel face aspect in the Schmodown or the character work and the promos and all that stuff is important, because the audience gets connected. And that's what The Rock was able to do better than anybody, is connect with the audience.
Absolutely. Jeremiah E. Hurd over on Patreon. What is the best, not necessarily favorite, third movie in a trilogy?
Well, obviously it's Back to the Future 3, but
wow.
If I had to find, well, here's my thing. And this is an argument that I have. Back to the Future, in my opinion, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's the best pure trilogy ever made. And when I say that, I mean no other entries in the series. I know you said you don't really count Lord of the Rings and Hobbit, but it's Peter Jackson has
Yep.
expanded on the same subject material. You can say it's a part of a franchise. Even none of the Marvel Cinematic Universes. There's the Iron Man trilogy. There's the Thor trilogy. There's Captain America trilogy, but it's all a bigger one.
Yeah, it's
the
all
only
big
other.
universe.
I mean, Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, Star Wars. I mean, they're all Jaws is I guess, but they're all expanded, right? The only other like straight up trilogy that I could think of that could come up to the Back to the Future ranks is Godfather, and then let's be honest, the third one is like a little bit. I don't know about that. So for me, I think Back to the Future is the greatest pure trilogy of all time. But if I'm throwing that out and I'm saying what's the best third movie in a trilogy, it's got to be The Last Crusade. There's not a more fun. It's my favorite actually of the indie films too.
Same.
Is The Last Crusade.
I'm a Last Crusader for sure. And like
So
that,
fun.
I think if it wasn't for Return of the King, I'd say Last Crusade, but I'll say Return of the King. But Last Crusade is definitely up there. It's on Netflix. I just rewatched it, and God, that movie's so great. Junior, and just like, and especially when he's been just like, and it might be one of my favorite moments in movie history, like let alone trilogies, whatever you want. When he says Indiana, when he's got his hand and he's reaching for the cup, when he says Indiana, let it go. Oh my God, chills every single time. I've watched that movie 20, 30 times in my life, and that is such one of the best father-son moments, and especially to have it between Sean Connery and Harrison Ford, like, it's amazing.
And I think the funny thing is they're only like a few years apart in age. You know that? They're only like a couple years apart. I think it's like less than 10 years apart in age. So it almost didn't even make sense for him to be his dad. But Sean Connery, aka James Bond, was the literal father of Indiana Jones because Steven Spielberg wanted to direct a Bond movie, and George Lucas is like, "Hey, I have something better than Bond. His name is Indiana Smith." And Steven Spielberg was like, let's work on the name a little bit. And that's what ended up being Indiana Jones. And, we're eventually going to get a fifth film. Maybe that'll be up there.
Eventually.
I don't know, but in 2047 or whatever it's going to come out.
We'll just have Call of the Wild be the fifth Indiana Jones film. Like instead of Shia LaBeouf, we've got a CGI dog.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. What a weird choice, by the way, to make a CGI dog. But I think that one, I think the Last Crusade, I mean, even, what scene in that movie still makes me like tense up is when they're at like the book burning thing and he's trying to get the Grail diary back, and it's so tense. And then he bumps into Hitler and he has the book in his hand and he's like, oh crap, Hitler's about to burn the book. And then Hitler autographs it. Oh, God, such a,
and even
so
like
tense.
You get like the darkness of Indiana Jones when he runs into, I can't think of, it's not Inga, but it's like whatever her name is.
God, if you didn't say it, I could have told you.
I messed
Schneider,
up.
her last name though, right?
Yes,
I think, yeah. But anyway,
someone in the chat will tell us. But just like when he's got her and he's like, all I have to do is squeeze, and it's like, God, Indiana, like you're real mad at her.
All I have to do is scream, and it's like, what's great. I love, So I think that's if you count that one as a trilogy, which obviously it does, that's the best one. That's the best one for me.
I agree. Heather Perminter. Brad, who are some rookies in the MTS you're looking forward to seeing more from? What are your 3 top favorite MTS matches, and what is your favorite Texas barbecue place?
Oh, man. Favorite Texas barbecue place is a place called Central Texas Barbecue. Obviously, it's real great. It's over there in Pearland. It's a suburb outside of Houston. Really good. Also, Papa's Barbecue is good. And Good Company, ironically, is good. But as far as my three rookies, is that what it said?
Who are some rookies you looking forward to seeing more of?
Definitely more of Ben Goddard. I want to see more of the Barbarian. I guess Chandru technically isn't a rookie, but I do want to see more Chandru. He's still like on his first full year, I think, in MTS. And then I still want to see Robert Parker. He's been so hyped. I want so hype,
so much hype around Robert. And like, even I'm saying, like, I'm afraid to play him in Lord of the Rings. I've never seen the guy play. Why am I afraid of him? But he's like this like larger than life figure, and he hasn't stepped on the field yet.
Brother's a magician too. Like his card tricks.
I can vouch for his magic tricks. That's for sure. That guy is a hell of a magician. We just need to see him play.
And was there another part to that question?
What are some top 3 favorite MTS matches?
Oh, favorite MTS matches. Well, number one was that Atlanta Live event, Dan Murrell
Oh,
and
so
Ben
great.
Bateman. I mean, beyond. It's beyond. That match was beyond. Also, I love the Star Wars Iron Man match, which is
Oh,
great.
that was so good, especially because like Sam was up by like 4 or 5 with like a minute to go, and Ken caught him, and it came down. How did it come down to the last question? And I don't even want to spoil it for who won, because if you guys haven't seen that Iron Man match, just know that Whitwer's up by 5 in an Iron Man match with a minute to go, and Ken ties it up in the last 10 seconds.
I mean, phenomenal. And then I think as far as a third one would be that first Schmodown Throwdown with Rachel and Mike. For Mike to come back from 8 points
Nuts.
when he was down 8, it was so crazy. And for that match had all the tension, all the drama and everything. And if I could throw in a fourth, I just love it because it was in my hometown. It was in my home arena. The Ben Bateman versus Andrew Guy
Oh,
match.
yeah. Drama and storyline wise, I don't think there's anything better. Like if you're going strictly like trivia, then it might be, but there's nothing better than, you know, Roxy getting in there, Andrew getting hit with a chair, like a double spinner's choice, opponent's choice, digital wheel controversy, just everything.
Yeah, I mean, it had everything. I mean, the story, and what was great about that is, so Booker got to the building maybe like an hour before, and he had a meet and greet, and Christian the whole day was like, "Hey man, like, hey, I mean, here's the story points I want Booker to hit. And I'm like, and he's kind of, you know, I mean, Christian wants everything to be perfect, and I understood like his urgency, and I'm like, hey, don't worry, man. When he gets here, trust me, he's got it. Don't worry, he's got it. And then finally Booker gets there, and we're like maybe 10 minutes before we're starting. And Booker's in his office, and Christian's like, okay, hey, here's what I want you to do. Da-da-da-da-da. And Booker goes, all right, give it to me one more time. And then Christian runs it down. He's like, all right, I got it. And it was like, 30 seconds. And then Booker goes out there and he hits every single beat perfectly.
God.
And Christian looked at me like, oh my God, thank you. It worked out so great. So that event will always hold a special place for me. But yeah, definitely. I think that Atlanta Live event, I just don't know if there's ever been a better match.
I don't know if there will be or if there can be, honestly, like a championship match with the hottest player at the time, and then a guy who's considered the greatest of all time, who's never lost a live event, who's coming in this with just all the pedigree in the world, but you have and then just the way it happened, how Dan was up so early in the first few rounds, Ben goes up by 3, misses his 5-pointer. And you see the question, like, if he gets one more round 1 question, if he gets the Anne Hathaway question steal, if he gets Black Panther, that's it. That's it. But everything lined up to just have this amazing match.
It was so crazy. And that was one. So I know a lot of people have talked about it, but I was sitting next to Dan's mother for that match. And she was like, all like, up. And, I mean, you could tell her emotions were going crazy.
Yeah.
And then I went up there during the speed round. I mean, not during the speed round, during the sudden death round. And you were standing up there.
Yeah, that was, I was finally done with work. And I was like finally backstage ready to help out.
So it was like me, you, and Mara were standing side stage for that final. And then when I knew they both had different answers, I don't know why, I just knew they had different answers. And I didn't know what the answer was. And when Dan wins it, I mean, that place goes crazy. Mara's freaking out. His mom's freaking out. And I got caught up in the moment. And then I forgot. I'm like, oh, I got to go out there and do these interviews. But I got caught up because it was such a great moment.
Well, all of us, because like Dan obviously knew the minute work answer, and Mara knew it. And I was pretty sure it was Emilio. It was Emilio or Charlie Sheen. I can't remember what the answer was, but it was like,
I think it was Emilio.
What? Yeah. So it was Charlie Sheen and who starts a minute work. And Ben uses his repeat. And I'm like, oh, does he not know this? Like, because, Dan literally said, he's like, thank God for Blockbuster, because I just saw the cover of that movie. And I'm in that same boat. That's the only reason I knew that answer.
Yeah.
But Ben says Steve Guttenberg, and like 3 or 4 people in the crowd go, yep. Like someone says yes, or I don't know if they were saying, yep, Dan's got it, or something. But like 3 people in the crowd go, yep. And I was like, wait, is it Steve Guttenberg? And then when Dan puts Emilio, and I was like, and people start clapping. And even Dan didn't, like, Dan told me later, he was like, yeah, I heard those people go, yes. So I thought I was wrong too. And so like no one knew in that crazy moment of everyone erupting until like that's why you see Dan in the VOD. He's just like, oh, and then like then he has this reaction because he honestly didn't know, because like there's a few people that were like screaming yes when Ben, they must have been cheering for the wrong answer that Ben got or something. But yeah, I thought he had that Lars answer too. I thought he had that 5-pointer for sure. I thought he was doing his Bateman thing.
I thought he was too. But somebody, and God dang it, I forgot his name again. I forgot who it was because he hit me up on Twitter. But somebody told me before, hey, Ben has Ben's blind spot. Ben has a blind spot in like these family movies from the mid 90s. And when Heavyweights came up, I was like, oh, he might not know this. And for a minute, I thought he was doing the Ben thing, but then I realized that he actually didn't know it, and the rest was history.
The rest was history. All right, we got do you have a heart out, Brad? I've got like 2 or 3 more Patreon questions.
Go ahead.
All right, cool. Brandy Parker, is there something else you see yourself writing a book about?
It's interesting. So I guess I don't mind revealing this. The deal I signed, I have to pitch like 2 more books to them, to the publisher.
Oh, wow.
I have to pitch. So doesn't mean they'll take them, but I'm required to pitch 2 more. So I've been thinking about it. One of them is Bond, and I was actually DMing with an MTS fan, I believe, about an idea I had for the Bond book. And then another one is obviously wrestling. I've worked in it now for almost a decade, and I've watched it for almost 3. And I have a lot of stories and theories and ideas and things that I could talk about from an interesting perspective. So wrestling was one, James Bond's another, and then the third one idea I had is I don't think anyone's really done a deep dive on Home Alone.
Oh, that'd be good.
Home Alone franchise. I really do. It was a couple years ago. WrestleMania was in New Orleans, and I was doing a thing called Radio Row. So, similar to Super Bowl or other big events, they have a bunch of radio stations come out, and they have guests come around. So Booker obviously works for WWE, so we got a really good spot for Radio Row. Yeah. And so we were around the ring for NXT, and there's only 4 shows there, and then the rest of them, as I like to call the rest of the jabronis, were over there like by craft services or something, just hoping for a glimpse of somebody. No, I'm kidding. But we were like the 4 main shows that they'd bring all the guests to first. So I was excited. So I saw Peter Rosenberg, who's from Hot 97, somebody I know. I'm like, hey, what's going on, Pete? I saw Sam Roberts, who has a show on Sirius XM with oh man, I can't think of Jim Norton. So I said hi to him, whatever. And we were talking actually back then, we were talking that Jim Norton was going to be in The Irishman, and he was going to play Don Rickles and all this stuff, his co-host. So it was cool. And then there was a 4th show, and I didn't know who it was. And I was like, who the hell is that? And then a friend of mine who works for WWE now, who's in the Schmodown, Johnny LaQuasto.
Oh, yeah.
He came over to me, and we were talking, and I've known Johnny for several years. And he was like, hey, is that Macaulay Culkin? And I'm like, who? And he points over to the other show. I didn't know who it was. And I'm like, holy hell, that is Macaulay Culkin. What is he doing here? And so I was sitting there next to Booker, and I'm like, hey, Book, Macaulay Culkin's over there? And Booker was like, so? What do I care? Yeah. And I'm like, no, but you understand, this Macaulay Culkin. Macaulay Culkin ends up walking over to our show, our booth. He's like, hey, Booker, it's great to meet you. And then he looks at me, he's like, Brad? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh, I listened to y'all's show. And I'm like, oh, what? Oh, I'm like, so I shake his hand, and I'm like, it's awesome. And then so he like knew, like we had like some big thing that we did on our show that ended up getting picked up by all the wrestling websites. So he was like talking to us about that. And then later on, he and I just ended up talking after the whole event was over. He gave me, I have them here somewhere. I don't know where they are. They're in my room somewhere. Here, hold on.
All right. Oh man.
So Macaulay Culkin is where afterward we're talking, and he's like, hey, I want to give you something. And I'm like, okay. And so he reaches into his bag and he pulls out these. And he gave me a set of bunny ears. So these are from my best friend.
Like that.
These are from my best friend Macaulay Culkin that he gave me at WrestleMania in New Orleans. And so, but I've always been a huge Home Alone fan. And so I thought about, man, maybe that'd be a fun thing to go down. Home Alone, John Hughes. Everyone loves John Hughes, Joe Pesci, Macaulay Culkin. I think another perfect movie, Home Alone 1.
Oh, yeah.
One of the most rewatchable films I think ever. I watched that.
And that John Williams score does not get enough love either.
Oh, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's the most frustrating thing about Home Alone is he makes that delicious looking mac and cheese dinner, and then the bell chimes, and he doesn't eat a single fucking bite of it.
So terrible. I hate that.
Like, to this day, it's literally a trigger for me that I'm like, just eat it. Just eat a bite. Like, you're there at a candlelit table. Just eat a bite.
You know, I also, a friend of mine and I talk about it all the time. I think it might be one of the more quotable movies ever, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's so many great, look what you did, you little jerk. You're what the French call les incompetents. Merry Christmas, you filthy animal.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many. I could sit here and name snakes. I don't know no snakes. And, all that stuff.
Buzz, your
1, 2, 10.
girlfriend. Woof.
Woof. So funny. So I thought about that. So if I were to do another book, it's maybe on one of those three things.
All right, I got 3 more here for you, Brad.
Yeah.
Delisha Renee, is there a commentator, either wrestling, sports, UFC, etc., that has influenced you in your own career?
It's a great question. I actually recently sent a book to one of my books. I wanted to get it to him, to Jim Ross, good old JR from WWE. He's the guy in the black hat. He and I actually both suffered from Bell's palsy. So it's another connection that we had. And he's one of the best ever. And it's cool for me now to have a relationship with him where we'll email here and there back and forth for a little while. He's doing great things over with All Elite Wrestling, which we know Jen Sturger works with as well. And so he's been doing great over there. But as far as who I think is a phenomenal commentator who kind of influences me a little bit, I'm more of an emotional storyteller from a commentary perspective. I react to big things and I'm screaming a lot. And I'm painting the picture. So my job is the color commentator. So I'm there to tell the story of the match more so than the play-by-play. And I don't think that anybody does it better than Joe Rogan in the UFC. I think that he's so good. He's one of the best commentators, I think, of all time. And so I don't know if I've taken any of my style from him, but I definitely love hearing him explain fights, and maybe subconsciously somewhere that is seeped into my own style.
For sure. I like that answer.
Yeah.
Commentating nerd. Other than Back to the Future trilogy, what movie or TV show is the best at establishing and using sci-fi time travel rules?
Oh, man. Setting the rules and establishing them. Well, I think that probably the age-old classic is Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a time travel movie, because the thing is and I'm sure someone who has like a physics degree will tell me that I'm wrong, but I really like how Back to the Future does it, because they don't move through space, right? They just move through, they just move through time. They don't move through space.
Yeah.
Right? So they don't like leave Hill Valley and then end up in New Mexico or end up in France or whatever. They just go from Hill Valley and they end up in the same exact spot just 30 years before. I always really liked how they did that. Other movies like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure or Bogus Journey, travel, real fun in the phone booth. And
it's so great. Remember a trash can.
Yeah. I watched that movie the other night. It was great. I don't know if like there's one that just has great rules that I would say is really, this is how you should do it. But there's so many time travel movies that I just like. You know what time travel movie I watched the other night? Do you remember Martin Lawrence Black Knight?
Oh my God, Black Knight. It's like Black Knight and Kid in King Arthur's Court came out like so close to each other too. Like I feel like
Kid in King Arthur's Court. That one I actually love. I love Kid in King Arthur's Court.
Yeah.
Daniel Craig is in that movie. So I really enjoy that. He's like the jousting instructor or whatever. But I watched Black Knight the other night. Definitely not a great movie, but Martin Lawrence is thing. And then Kid in King Arthur's Court I forgot about. And then there was the Kid in Aladdin's Palace, of course, as well. I don't know if you ever saw that one, but that was the follow-up.
I don't think I ever saw it, but I remember it. And I say I liked how Endgame handled time travel. I know it's a recent one.
Oh,
I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to dissect it, but I love that they're like going back to the same moment in the past doesn't affect the future because you're just creating a new timeline. Like I did like that, and I thought and it's same with like Looper. Like Looper handled it well by almost like the Ryan Johnson way by not handling it. It's like if you overthink it, you're gonna fry your brain. let's just move on with the story. And like they literally say that in the movie. He's like, just don't think about it. It's like,
Yeah, don't try too much. And then it happens with Back to the Future too. There's all these like fan boards where it's like, well, there's a Marty A and then there's a Marty B and a Marty D, and then Marty D kills Marty A because of and it's like, whoa, we're thinking too much here. So I think that Endgame was great. Endgame was a good one. I don't like that they threw all those shots at Back to the Future.
Right.
But I actually think that once again shows its pop cultural relevance. The biggest movie of all time in two separate scenes has to make reference to Back to the Future, because when you talk about time travel, that's the first movie everyone thinks about.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with changing the future, how Marty does it in such a significant way. Like, you got to go Back to the Future. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Brandon Buckingham, if you could time travel, where would you want to go? Would you bring anyone with you? Go Astros.
That's right, brother. World champion Astros, H-Town. If I could go anywhere, so this might sound crazy, but I really have a fascination with history, especially presidential history.
Okay.
And I would really, not that I would like to see it or anything, but to be in Dallas, Texas, on November 22nd, 1963, and be in Daley Plaza and just take in the experience of, it sounds kind of morbid, but just to be around, even if it was after the fact, the next day, just to see what everything was going like. Because for us, for our age group, Ben, everyone remembers where they were at 9/11.
Yeah, 9/11 is our Kennedy assassination for sure.
I always talk to my folks about, hey man, so where were you when Kennedy was assassinated? Like, what happened? And since it was in Texas, it feels like, I don't know, it'd be something I'd want to know kind of what the vibe was, because you hear how affected everybody was. I mean, on both sides of the aisle, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Catholics, Jewish people, everybody was affected by it. And there's actually, interestingly enough, there's a time travel series produced by J.J. Abrams, based off a Stephen King novel, on Hulu with James Franco.
Oh, the 8/22/63 or something?
11/22/63, where he traveled back to prevent the assassination of President Kennedy.
Is it good?
I was like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
It's not like the greatest thing I've ever seen. It's a little dark. I guess it was darker than I expected, but I should have known that, being it was Stephen King. But I did enjoy it. I did enjoy seeing that. But to be there and to see if there's, because I don't know if you've ever been, but I went to Daley Plaza back when WrestleMania was in Dallas, and I stood on the grassy knoll. I stood behind the fence. I looked at the book depository. I walked the whole thing, and I saw the X on the ground where it all went down, and it was really a surreal experience. So to be there. And I don't know, just be around that time period to witness history. That's my thing. I don't want to alter history, but to witness it, that'd be something really cool.
No, I like that answer a lot, because like I remember I think it's in When Harry Met Sally, and Billy Crystal's like, so I was on a date, and I remember asking a girl like, oh, where were you when Kennedy was shot? And she was like, oh, Kennedy was shot, and that that was like a deal breaker for him, because like and I was like, why is he asking that? And this was obviously before 9/11. Right. But even like for us, like, like as kids, like we're not going to be like, oh, so where were you on 9/11 as an 11-year-old or 10-year-old or something like that? And it's like, it's a different thing. And especially now when we have, I don't mean to bring the whole story down, but we have so many mass shootings, they don't stay in the news cycle so much. Like even the Vegas one, which is the worst thing in U.S. history, was gone after like 10 days. And it was really strange. So I get what you're saying. Like that would be interesting just to live in this like tragic moment for an entire nation where there isn't, daily news. They're not chasing like, in Anchorman 2, there's that funny part where he's like, oh, put me on that car chase. It's like, oh, that's not news. It's just a car chase. Well, it's going to be news now. And that's what, if it bleeds, it leads, is that old saying.
Right.
And so I just months and months of reporting on the Kennedy assassination. You're right. I would really love to like live in that time of like how it really brought this nation almost to its knees in a time of crisis too.
Yeah. And I'd like to see if it was really Lee Harvey Oswald. You know what I mean? I would have my eyes on the book depository. You know what I mean? I would try to figure it out and crack the case, because I actually really like the JFK movie, even though it's a little long and a little crazy. I do enjoy it just because I love the subject matter. So I'll kind of watch anything about it.
Yeah.
And to know, wouldn't you love to know? Like just
just like lean up against the building of the library and just like wait for Lee Harvey Oswald just to walk out and be like, got you, motherfucker.
Yeah, it was you. I mean, as weird as that is, I would like to be a part of history.
Absolutely. And we got two more comments on Streamlabs, and I'll get you out of here, Brad. Fair smooth on it. Ben, you should watch the Supermarket Brawl. Brad, do you have any anecdotes about that brawl from Booker?
So it's actually
I know what this is too. I've seen
Yeah.
the Supermarket Brawl, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's Booker T versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in a grocery store. It was filmed in Bakersfield, and it was at a place called the Green Frog grocery store.
Okay.
And I just know because I've asked him about it 1,000 times. And so the great thing is, Vince McMahon paid for this whole. They rented out the whole grocery store, and they told him, "Hey, we're going to break a lot of stuff, and here's a big check just for it to all be okay, right?" And then they were cool with it. They filmed it, I think, the day of SmackDown, and Booker and Steve, they didn't even do a walkthrough of what they're going to do. They kind of talked like, "Oh, maybe we could do something where I, hit you with some flour here, or maybe some eggs. Maybe we'll go through the dairy aisle, or whatever." I think they only had one or two things planned, and then it was one take. Whatever you get, you get. And it turned out to be one of the most memorable and legendary moments in SmackDown, and for that matter, WWE history. I think SmackDown had like an anniversary show last year, and I think it was named either the number 1 or number 2 moment in SmackDown history, which is like decades and decades and thousands of episodes. That was like number 2. So yeah, he's full of stories like that, but that was one that was really, really cool to know the inside baseball of.
Just the fact that it was one take and they didn't even rehearse anything is just amazing.
That's the thing, man. And that's why I knew, going back to the Houston Live event, Booker was going to be fine. Because it's like, he's done this a million times. Just tell him what you need to hit. What are the beats? Okay, I'll get him. I'll get him in there somewhere. And in the Green Frog grocery store, which isn't there anymore. But that was one that's going to live in wrestling history forever.
Absolutely. And last one, for new wrestling fans, a great short feud is Velveteen Dream versus Aleister Black in NXT. A great mix of character work and ring action for sure.
Yeah, that was good. I actually saw the culmination of that. Their last match was in Houston. I was sitting front row for it in the Toyota Center. And yeah, those are two. If anyone wants to go check out the best wrestling match ever, it's WrestleMania 25. Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker. You won't be disappointed by that.
Okay. All right, Brad, I'll get you out of here. Thanks for staying a little bit longer. I think it's our longest episode. Thank you so much, man, for all your Back to the Future expertise. Plug everything you got right now, every podcast, all your books. Honestly, the most thing I want is where you getting your haircut. Look at this mess up here. Like, are hair shops still open down in Texas? Because I need some help.
They are not, my brother. This is a month right now without me getting a trim. I'm feeling a little crazy. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm feeling a little crazy. You can follow me on all social media at Brad Gilmore. Go check out my channel, Reality of Wrestling, where Booker T and I not only have a wrestling promotion, which I'm the commentator. We do our show right now live on YouTube right now in the interim while this whole COVID-19 thing's going on. So it's Hall of Fame, as you can check that out. We have special guests on all the time, and it's really fun. We talk wrestling, boxing, MMA, all the combat sports. So it's real fun to do. And then, yeah, again, just check out my Back to the Future podcast. That's something that I think that more people, that's how the book came about, is because someone found the podcast, and here we are. And because of the podcast and Ken Knapsack, I have a book. So go check that out. We have 6 seasons. I've talked to people from the movie, Claudia Wells, who played Jennifer Parker. I've talked to both men who've played George McFly. That is Crispin Glover and Jeffrey Weissman have both been on my show. Harry Waters Jr. I mean, the list goes on and on. I've had so many great people on the show talking about it. I had, if someone wants to laugh at me, go listen to the Mayor Goldie Wilson episode, and you'll have a really great time laughing at me for some of my brilliant mistakes. But so check out Back to the Future podcast. Check out my show, The Brad Gilmore Show. We just do celebrity interviews, short 15, 20-minute interviews with celebrities. So go check that out as well.
Nice. Well, happy to have you, Brad. Thank you so much. And thanks for sticking around a little bit extra for me. Really appreciate you, bud. Follow me on Twitter at the Ben Goddard, twitch.tv/the Ben Goddard, the Ben Goddard, basically everywhere. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Peace.
Hey guys, want to take a quick second to tell you about this Eagle Moss DeLorean buildup that I've been working on. So it's really cool. Eagle Moss has a subscription service where you can build your own DeLorean time machine, and they send it to you in a subscription service format. Every month or so, you get some of the parts for the DeLorean. They give you magazines that are step-by-step instructions about how you can actually get this. So I've just started on it. I have parts 1 and 2, but you can sign up today. It's a really great deal. It's a total risk-free trial offer. You get issues number 1 and issues number 2 parts and the magazines, plus a free exploded diagram poster. And get this, guys, this is the deal of a lifetime. It is $1.95 plus free shipping. That is the trial offer, the risk-free trial offer, issues 1 and 2 with the parts, magazine, and exploded diagram poster for $1.95 plus free shipping. You can't get any better than that. Go to eaglemoss.com. That's Eaglemoss, EAGLEMOSS.com, and sign up and build the Back to the Future DeLorean today.
Oh, Brad, what have you done now? Oh, Brad, what have you done